Okay, so as I've mentioned, I'm a huge Eric Johnson fan, and I thought a one-way pickslanting system was not a particularly worthwhile thing, which is somewhat ironic. Um, but I got the DVD reissues of Total Electric Guitar and Fine Art of Guitar. I think it was about 18. They were pretty hard to come by. I didn't have a credit card or anything until I was a little bit older. I couldn't order things from Amazon whenever I wanted them. There wasn't so much posting of copyrighted material on YouTube at the time. There wasn't that much on YouTube at the time. But I got the two videos, and it was really the first clear visual representation that I had of Eric Johnson's playing. I'd had the G3 DVD and, learned a bit from that, but I didn't really have a visual representation of Eric's playing. And I had thought that Eric was probably an alternate picker, because he didn't seem to play extended sweeps or anything like that. I thought there might be the occasional lick that had a bit of economy in it, but I thought that for the most part he would be an alternate picker. And then I obviously got the DVDs, and I think I was lucky in the sense that I had already figured out some of the ideas ahead of time. If I had watched Total Electric Guitar and The Fine Art of Guitar, with no idea of the geometry of picking, I probably would have got nothing from it. But he very clearly says that his upstrokes come out from the guitar, and then he has regular side-to-side downstrokes, which means that he's got a one-way pick slanting system. And I went through almost every sequence in Total Electric Guitar and followed the pick strokes, and sure enough, it's one-way pick slanting. It's a one-way escaping movement, and it's a highly capable thing when your vocabulary is built around your mechanics. Okay, obviously everybody's vocabulary is limited by their mechanics. Okay, if you can't play something, you can't play something. It's that clear. But not everybody's vocabulary is optimized around their mechanics. Eric was the first person I had really studied, who really took their mechanics to the extreme, and a simpler mechanical system than I had been working with previously. The alternate picking was tricky, the cross picking was tricky. I knew what I wanted to develop, and I developed them rather quickly, but they're still difficult movements. They're hard to learn, and they're as they get faster, you have less time to make those larger movements, and it gets more difficult for that reason as well. But when I saw Total Electric Guitar, and when I saw The Fine Art of Guitar, I realized one-way slanting, one-way escapes. And this was like, I felt like an idiot, I felt like, okay, well, I've been making Eric Johnson licks difficult for myself for the past, however long I'd been playing at that point, really, however long I'd been playing his material. And the position that he was using for his picking technique is not massively dissimilar from the Mode 2. In fact, I think much of Eric's playing comes from almost exactly the same position that I use when I'm in Mode 2. However, Eric's picking mechanics are of course different. It's generally a one-way slanting technique, or it's the bounce, which is a hopping movement. So this was the first time I realized the benefit of a one-way slanting system, and now that I realize this, I go into depth on on a one-way slanting system. And the way I achieve one-way slanting here, to go from kind of mode 2 to what I call mode 3, which in my mind is the Eric Johnson method, is that I took my fingers. So instead of my fingers being on the strings, I roll them in further into my hand. So I still have a very, very strong damping capacity here. My fingers are just out of the way. They're not trailing around the place. What this does, and you might think, well, you're eliminating your ability to hyperpick. I haven't done that. It's very, very easy for me to switch back from here to here. Okay, it's not a difficult movement. But the big benefit of doing this is that I get a much more reliable downward pick slant. Okay, which is super easy to maintain. It tracks along the strings perfectly because of the position of the hand, and it's going to be super clean. It's going to be super clean because there's so much flesh in contact with the strings. In fact, when I pick, only the note that's ringing is the one that can ring out. Everything else is muted. So this is a really great method for me, and it works really well for me. Eric has a little bit more pick depth than I tend to use, but I mean, I love this method. It's so easy. Really, really smooth and fluid. There's not a whole lot to say about it. I think it's the same basic deviation movement. Like that. And I tend to pick, just a little bit more towards the neck than would be on the middle position of a Stratocaster. Eric says to use a light grip, so I tend to. And I really do think that does affect the sound, makes it, makes the notes sing a little bit more. That's mode 3, and mode 3 for me, was my first idea of, picking strategies that weren't strictly alternate picking or strict economy picking. It was the first time I thought, well, I have a simplified mechanical system. I'm just going to optimize the lines around that idea, which is something that is an incredibly valuable lesson, I feel. And I think that the extreme compatibility of this movement, this position, and movement with mode 2 as well, with the two-way slanting, alternate and economy, and cross-picking, and swybrid position. I probably use this more than I actually realize. I probably lock into this more than I actually think I do, because the change between here and here is so minimal and so comfortable that I can do it very quickly. I don't typically change between modes 1 and modes 2, mode 1 and mode 2, in the context of a line. I would typically be in one mode for an entire line. However, with mode 2 and mode 3, I actually can quite comfortably switch between the two. So that's something that is very, very good for me. Also, this was really when I felt like I'd cracked Eric's playing. I'd kind of gone from not understanding how it was done and just thinking it was absolute magic to realizing that there's a different kind of beauty to it as well, a mechanical beauty, something so simple but so effective, and allowing for such a beautiful vocabulary and such an immense variety of stylistic playing, such wonderful control over tone and dynamics and note shaping and nuance. This is what happens when somebody, a mechanical genius, discovers a position, something that works for them, and then just takes it to the absolute extremes. develops every aspect of it. And I recently said on the forum that, late 80s to mid 90s Eric Johnson was an absolutely terrifying guitar monster, who to this day still sometimes gives me nightmares. There's things in there that are just so extreme and so difficult that it really beggars belief. But it all comes from this fundamental picking movement, which is astonishing how far he took it. It really is. And when I say simplified, I'm not in any way trying to diminish that system. Not at all. I have massive respect for it because of its simplicity and how it is taken to the extremes.